On the night of June 15, 1979, the quiet hills surrounding Center, Alabama shifted in a way no one could explain. By sunrise on June 16th, 12 men were dead across a narrow stretch of Appalachian woods, hung, spaced evenly, as if arranged by something colder than rage. All adults, all from the same bloodline, and the perpetrators were not a militia, not outsiders, not law enforcement. They were the Walkers, three brothers shaped by the mountains, trained by hardship, and pushed past a line no family should cross. State authorities would later call it an episode of rural collapse. Locals call it something else, the Ridge Killings. But the cause wasn't drugs, money, or a generational feud. It began with a pack of Lucky Strike left in the wrong place, a challenge thrown at the wrong man, and a pride too old and heavy to ignore. Before we continue with the video, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from and what time it is there. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. The Appalachian Mountains had seen plenty of feuds before 1979, but nothing like what was about to unfold that June night. The people of Redwater Ridge would later swear the air felt different, heavier, thicker, like the mountains themselves were holding their breath. And deep in that forgotten valley, where the forest swallowed sound and secrets lived longer than men, the Walkers were silently crossing a line they could never uncross. At 11:46 p.m., Levi Walker pushed open the door of Clyde's Tavern, the only bar for 12 miles in any direction. Neon lights buzzed overhead, casting a sickly glow on the worn wooden floors. The place smelled like stale beer, sweat, and diesel fuel. Hardly a palace, but for miners, truckers, and men who had already lost too much to life, it was the only place that felt familiar. Levi didn't drink much. He didn't have to. He was the kind of man whose presence was loud even when he said nothing. Broad shoulders, face carved by years of coal dust and disappointment, eyes sharp enough to slice through fog. Some people looked at him and saw a threat. Others saw a man who'd already buried more than his share of brothers, friends, and hope. Tonight, he just wanted quiet. He never got it. As he stepped toward the bar, something slid against his boot, something too crisp, too deliberate to be an accident. Levi froze, lowering his gaze slowly, and there it was, small, rectangular, harmless to anyone who didn't understand the language of this valley. A pack of Lucky Strike cigarettes, not dropped, placed, a message. Levi didn't bend down right away. He stared at it for a long moment, jaw tightening until his molars threatened to crack. In 1979, everyone in Redwater Ridge knew who smoked Lucky Strike. The McCready boys, Chet, Ray, Lonnie, and their crew of loudmouthed opportunists who treated trouble like a family tradition. They'd been pushing the Walkers for years, testing boundaries, making jokes they shouldn't make, and last week, they'd taken it too far. They'd cornered Levi's youngest brother, Thomas, outside the general store and beaten him so badly he couldn't open his left eye for 3 days. No one admitted it. No one needed to. Levi finally crouched and picked up the cigarette pack. His thumb brushed over the crumpled cardboard. There were muddy fingerprints on the white surface, smudged like whoever left it wanted him to notice they weren't trying to hide. A challenge, a dare, a declaration of war. Levi slipped the pack into his coat pocket and straightened slowly. No one in the bar spoke. No one moved. Every man inside felt something shift, like an invisible fault line had finally snapped. Without a word, Levi turned and walked out. The gravel crunched beneath his boots as he stepped outside. The moon hung low over the ridge, casting long shadows that stretched across the ground like dark fingers pointing him home. As he walked, the sound of the tavern door creaking shut behind him echoed down the empty road, final, hollow, like the closing of a coffin. Half a mile later, Levi reached the Walker cabin, a 2-story weathered structure of warped planks and patched-up windows, sitting at the edge of the tree line like a stubborn reminder that the family refused to leave the land their great-grandfather staked in 1903. Inside, 2 men were waiting. Owen Walker leaned against the stove, his arms crossed, his face bruised from a fight he never admitted he lost. He was the quiet storm of the family, rarely emotional, always steady, deadly when cornered. Jesse Walker sat at the table, sharpening a hunting knife with slow, deliberate strokes. His movements were calm, almost surgical, the way a man behaves when he's trying not to think about the violence he's capable of. Levi didn't have to show them the Lucky Strike pack. He placed it on the table anyway. Owen's jaw flexed. Jesse's eyes darkened. No words were necessary. The Walkers didn't start feuds. But when one landed on their doorstep, they finished it with precision. It wasn't bravado. It wasn't pride. It was survival. In 1979, out here in the cracks of America, the law was a rumor people talked about, but rarely saw. Justice belonged to whoever had the courage, or cruelty, to enforce it. Levi finally spoke, his voice low and steady. "They want a war." Jesse stopped sharpening the blade. Owen pushed off the stove. Jesse asked the only question that mattered. "How many?" Levi exhaled slowly. 11. He didn't have to explain why. The McCready crew had swollen to 11 men, brothers, cousins, drifters, who attached themselves like ticks to the biggest bull in the field. Men who laughed too loud, drank too much, and believed they were bulletproof because no one had challenged them in years, until now. Levi opened the drawer beneath the table. Inside was a folded length of coarse rope. Old, frayed, strong, the kind used on farms, or for something else entirely. Something darker. Owen's eyes flicked to the rope, then back to Levi. "Tonight?" he asked. Levi nodded once. The mountains outside were silent, listening. Jesse slid the knife into its sheath. "Then let's finish what they started." At 1:12 a.m., the Walker brothers stepped into the darkness. The rope coiled over Levi's shoulder, the smell of pine thick in the air. No shouting, no chaos, no hesitation. By sunrise, 11 men would hang like warnings carved into the spine of the mountains, and the ridge would never be the same. By sunrise on June 16, 1979, Center, Alabama felt wrong, the kind of wrong that settled in the bones before reaching the mind. Mist clung low over the foothills, thick enough to erase the edges of the world, leaving only the dark silhouettes of the Appalachian pines. The town was quiet, too quiet for a Saturday. Dogs didn't bark, birds didn't sing, and even the usual rumble of trucks on Main Street had vanished. Word had not yet spread about what the Walkers did in the night, but the mountains themselves seemed to know. In a small cabin off Highway 401, just past the bend where the pavement fades into gravel, Levi Walker stood at the back door, staring at the rope burns on his palms. He wasn't trembling. Levi didn't tremble, but something inside him shifted, slow, heavy, irreversible, like a gear locking into place. Behind him, Jesse Walker moved quietly through the kitchen, washing dried mud and streaks of blood from his forearms. The water ran brown at first, then red, then finally clear. Owen sat at the table, leaning forward, elbows on his knees, head bowed as if he were praying, though everyone in Center knew the Walkers didn't pray. The cabin smelled of damp wood, cigarette smoke, and the metallic sweetness of old blood, the kind that settles into the air even after you've scrubbed the floors clean. No one spoke. Not yet. Levi finally turned away from the door and looked at his brothers. Owen lifted his head, eyes hollow but steady. Jesse dried his arms on a rag, tossed it aside, and waited. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was full, filled with memory, duty, and something darker. The Walkers had always lived by a code, not written, not spoken often, but etched into their bones. You hurt one Walker, you answer to all of them. What happened last night wasn't rage. It wasn't impulse. It was the code doing what the code demanded. Jesse broke the silence first. "You think anyone saw?" Levi's response was calm enough to unsettle a man. "No one who'd talk about it." Owen rubbed a hand over his face. 11 men, Levi. 11. That's why no one will talk," Levi muttered. Jesse almost smiled. Not a happy smile, but the kind a man makes when he understands exactly how fear operates. In the Appalachian parts of Alabama, families weren't protected by the law. They were protected by reputation. And after last night, the Walkers didn't just have a reputation, they had a legacy. Owen stood slowly, the floorboards creaking under his boots. "Chet McCready won't let this lie." Levi met his brother's eyes. "Chet McCready is hanging from a pin oak this morning." Owen froze. Jesse did too. Jesse's voice dropped to a whisper. "You're sure?" Levi nodded once. That changed everything. Chet hadn't been just another troublemaker. He'd been the center of the McCready clan. Loud, reckless, magnetic in a dangerous way. Men followed him because they believed he could get them out of any situation. He wasn't feared, he was trusted, and now he was gone. Owen let out a breath, slow and shaky. His kin won't take that quietly. "No," Levi said, "they won't. The problem wasn't the dead, it was the living." The McCready family was large. Uncles, cousins, in-laws, and drifters who used their last name like a shield. Center, Alabama might have been small, but the McCready influence stretched across counties. The Walkers knew last night wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. Jesse stepped closer to the table. "So what now?" Levi took the Lucky Strike pack from his coat pocket and set it on the wood. The room seemed to darken around it. That small battered rectangle had changed the fate of 2 families in less than 12 hours. "This wasn't about cigarettes," Levi said. "It never was." Jesse frowned. "Then what?" Levi looked at both brothers, eyes sharpened by certainty. The McCreadys wanted control of these hills, highway routes, hunting grounds, the access road behind our land. They wanted the ridge. That pack wasn't a warning. It was a claim. Owen shook his head slowly. They should have known better. They did, Levi answered. They just didn't think we'd respond, and that was the heart of it. The McCreadys believed the Walkers had softened, that Thomas's beating would go unanswered, that the family was fading, crumbling like the old mines around them. But the Walkers hadn't faded. They had been waiting. Jesse sat at the table, leaning forward. Town's gonna find out soon, Levi nodded. Before noon. What do we tell them? The truth, Levi said, that the McCreadys wanted a war. Owen spoke again, his voice lower than before. And if they want more? Levi didn't hesitate. Then we finish it. A distant truck engine rumbled along the main road, one of the first hints of life in Center that morning. The sun began to burn away the mist, exposing the shapes of trees, fields, and mountains that had witnessed more violence than anyone alive. Jesse stood, pacing. We need to be ready. We are, Levi replied. And in that moment, the Walker brothers understood something with absolute clarity. They weren't just involved in a feud. They were anchoring themselves into Appalachian history, into the dark lineage of blood debts that stretched back generations. Feuds here didn't die. They sank into the soil, feeding the ground like roots. Owen stepped toward the door. What are you doing? Jesse asked. Owen glanced back, his face calm. Checking the ridge. Levi nodded. Be careful. Owen gave a half smile. Careful stopped being an option last night. He slipped outside, disappearing into the morning fog. Inside the cabin, Levi stared again at the Lucky Strike pack on the table. His voice, when it finally came, was quiet enough to be mistaken for a prayer. They ended the peace, he said. Now, we end the silence. And with that, the Walker Code moved from the shadows into the open. The mountains knew it. The McCreadys would feel it. And Center, Alabama was about to drown in its consequences. By mid-morning Center, Alabama felt the shift, an invisible tension settling over the town like the weight of an oncoming storm. Folks going about their Saturday routines kept glancing toward the mountains, as if expecting something to emerge from the tree line. And in a way, they were right. News travels differently in the Appalachians. It doesn't need telephones or radios or law enforcement bulletins. It moves through glances, through silence, through the faces of men who've seen too much. And on June 16, 1979, every man in Center who passed the courthouse square felt the same chill roll down their spine. Something had happened, something big. At 10:07 a.m., the first scream carried through the ridge. By 10:11, the second. 2 hunters from Leesburg had been passing through the western edge of Center when they found the bodies. 11 men hanging from trees, spaced with surgical precision along the lower slopes of Lookout Mountain. The corpses swayed in the warm Alabama wind, boots dangling above the dirt, faces bloated and purple. Someone had scrubbed away the footprints. Someone had made sure the message was clear. By 10:30, Center was no longer just a quiet Appalachian town. It was a crime scene with a pulse. A deputy vomited behind a pine tree. A preacher crossed himself 3 times. And by 10:32 a.m., the name on everyone's lips, spoken quietly, cautiously, was the same: McCready. The dead men were members of the McCready bloodline, Chet's inner circle, cousins, brothers, drinking partners, and the kind of men who made trouble simply because they were bored. But no one expected this, not even close. A punch maybe, a shotgun fight perhaps, a stabbing behind the tavern on a bad night? Certainly. But 11 men hung like crops at harvest? This was beyond feud. This was declaration. And yet the one person everyone waited to see had not appeared: Chet McCready. The last time Chet was seen alive, he was drinking behind Murphy's feed store, bragging that the Walkers were soft as preacher hands these days. But no one had seen him since last night. Not his family, not his men, not even the drifters who shadowed him like stray dogs. At 10:45 a.m., people began whispering a possibility so terrifying it felt unreal: Chet might be number 12. And at 10:48 a.m., that rumor became fact. A farmer named Wade Burnside found Chet's body higher up the ridge, hanging from an oak tree thick enough to be older than Center's founding. The irony didn't escape anyone. Chet had always claimed he was king of this ridge. Now he hung from it. By 11:00 a.m., Sheriff Douglas Pike arrived, red-faced and sweating through his uniform, not because he was unfit, but because he knew exactly what this meant for his department. Nothing but trouble. Pike had been sheriff for 12 years, and he understood the politics of Center better than anyone. A McCready dead was a problem. 11 McCreadys dead was a crisis. 12 McCreadys dead meant war. The sheriff's deputies tried to secure the area, but Center wasn't a place where badges commanded obedience. Here, families did, bloodlines did, and the McCready bloodline had just lost almost all its men. The only remaining McCready male was Earl McCready, Chet's father, an aging, one-eyed patriarch with a shotgun, a limp, and a memory of every slight ever thrown his way. Earl wasn't the kind of man who mourned quietly. He was the kind who mourned with ammunition. At 11:22 a.m., Earl arrived at the crime scene on foot, shotgun in hand, breathing hard. His good eyes scanned the bodies one by one. He didn't cry. Crying was for men who had options left. Earl did not. After a long silence, Earl spoke a sentence that made even the sheriff swallow hard. "They want a feud," he said quietly. "I'll give them a war." The sheriff stepped toward him. "Earl, listen to me. We don't know who—" "Oh, save your breath, Doug," Earl snapped. "There's only one family in Center with the spine and the hatred to do this." Everyone knew he was right. The Walker name was already burning through the valley like wildfire. Mothers whispered it to keep their children close. Men spoke it with respect or fear, or both. And at 11:30 a.m., someone finally asked the question no one wanted to ask. Where are the Walkers now? No one knew, and that made it worse. Back at the Walker cabin, Levi sat at the kitchen table, looking at the Lucky Strike pack again. Jesse paced behind him, restless, coiled like a hunting dog on the scent. Owen stood by the window, scanning the tree line for movement. They knew the town would soon learn the truth. They knew Earl McCready wouldn't sit still. They knew something else too, something heavier. Something that couldn't be unsaid. There was no turning back. Jesse spoke first. "They'll be coming." Levi didn't lift his gaze. "Yes," Owen added. "Earl won't stop at threats. None of them will," Levi agreed. Silence. Not empty silence. Loaded silence. The kind that precedes an explosion. Finally, Levi stood. "We didn't start this." Owen looked at his brother. "But we ended it." Levi shook his head slowly. "No, we only ended the first part." Jesse stopped pacing. "You think Earl's coming today?" "No," Levi said. "Earl's smarter than his sons. He won't come angry. He'll come prepared." Jesse stepped closer. "So what do we do?" Levi met both their eyes. "We get ready." And the mountains seemed to nod in agreement. Because in Center, Alabama, the McCreadys were burying their dead. And the Walkers? The Walkers were preparing for whatever came next. By early afternoon, the sun burned through the mist over Center, Alabama, revealing a town teetering between fear and fury. The heat pressed down heavy, thick enough to turn sweat into salt trails on every man's face. But beneath the summer haze lay something colder, something sharper than the blades kept in glove compartments, and the shotguns hidden behind every farmhouse door. Center had always been a divided place, but today the line split clean through the middle like a crack in old timber. On one side stood those who feared the McCreadys. On the other stood those who feared the Walkers, and in between were the few who prayed the mountains would swallow both families whole. Sheriff Douglas Pike stood in the middle of Main Street, staring at the growing crowd. Farmers, mechanics, truckers, miners, and the wives who'd spent too many nights waiting for their husbands to return from bar fights or backroad deals. Pike could read their faces like the pages of a worn ledger. Worry, anger, exhaustion, curiosity, dread. Center had seen bad days before, but nothing like this. 11 bodies could be explained. A mass execution. A violent warning. But 12? 12 was a turning point. 12 was the beginning of something Center wasn't equipped to stop. Pike tried to calm the crowd. "We're investigating. That's all I can say right now." A mechanic shouted from the back, "It was the Walkers! Everybody knows it!" Murmurs rippled outward. Anger grew teeth. "Quiet!" Pike snapped, but his voice cracked with fatigue more than authority. A woman near the grocery store pulled her children close. An older man locked the door of his bait shop, even though it was broad daylight. In Center, when families started fortifying their homes before sundown, it meant only one thing: blood wasn't done spilling. The sheriff's radio crackled. "Doug, you need to get to Earl McCready's place. Now!" Pike clenched his jaw. "On my way." He pushed through the crowd, ignoring the accusations, the whispers, the pleas. His cruiser roared to life, tires throwing gravel as he sped down County Road 22. The road stretched long and empty, bending through the foothills where the shadows of trees looked like men watching him pass. The McCready farmhouse stood alone on a rise overlooking Shoal Creek, white paint peeling, porch sagging, yard littered with old tires and rusted tools. But today the place looked different. Cars lined the driveway. Men filled the yard. Guns gleamed in the sun. Earl McCready was building an army. Pike parked and stepped out slowly, hands visible. A half circle of McCready men stared him down. Uncles, cousins, neighbors, loyal through blood or fear. Earl emerged from the porch, shotgun in hand, his gait uneven from an old injury. His remaining eye burned with a hatred so fierce Pike felt it from yards away. "Doug!" Earl said, voice rough as gravel. "You here to stop me?" "I'm here to talk." Earl shook his head. Too late for that. Pike took a step closer. "Don't do this." Earl pointed the shotgun at the dirt. "Not at Pike. Yet. They killed my sons. My nephews, my blood. You expect me to sit quiet? We don't know it was the walkers. Earl barked a humorless laugh. There ain't another family in these hills capable of tying a noose proper, let alone 11. A murmur of agreement passed through the yard. Pike swallowed hard. If you retaliate, more people will die. Earl's expression hardened. Good. Pike felt the weight of the moment settle on his shoulders. Earl wasn't negotiating. He wasn't bluffing. He was preparing for war. Listen to me, Pike said quietly. If you do this, Center will never recover. Earl stepped down from the porch, standing inches from the sheriff. Then Center should have stopped the walkers last night. Pike held his gaze. Earl didn't blink. The sheriff finally asked, "What exactly are you planning?" Earl tilted his head, as if surprised Pike had to ask. "They took 12 of mine," he said. "So I'm taking the whole damn bloodline." Pike's heartbeat kicked into his throat. "Earl, there are women and children on that property, and the walkers shouldn't have started this." Pike felt the world tilt. Earl wasn't just gathering men. He wasn't just angry. He was willing to burn an entire family off the map. The sheriff backed away slowly, choosing his words with care. "You crossed that line, Earl, and I can't protect you." Earl smirked. "I ain't asking for protection, Doug. I'm asking for space." Two men stepped closer behind Earl, armed and ready. The message was clear. Conversation over. Pike retreated to his cruiser. As he pulled away, he saw Earl giving orders. Men loading ammunition, others checking maps, a few tying rags around their arms, marking themselves for whatever battle they envisioned. The McCrady's were mobilizing, and Center was running out of time. Back at the Walker cabin, Owen returned from the ridge, face tight with concern. "They found the bodies," he said as he stepped inside. Levi didn't turn from the window. "How bad?" "Bad enough." Owen set his hat on the table. "Earl's gathering men." Jesse tensed. "How many?" "Too many." Silence fell heavy, thicker than the heat outside. Levi finally spoke. "He'll come tonight, or tomorrow at the latest." Owen nodded. "We need a plan." Jesse smirked faintly. "We already have one. Survive." Levi turned from the window, eyes cold but unwavering. "No, this time we don't wait. The McCready's want war." He stepped forward. "Then we bring it to them." And in that moment, Center, Alabama was no longer divided. It was doomed. By the time dusk crept over Center, Alabama, the ridge had become a living thing. Breathing, waiting, listening. The June heat softened into a thick, warm heaviness that clung to the skin, but it did nothing to ease the tension pressing into the valley. The shadows grew long, swallowing fences, barns, and the winding dirt roads that carved through the Appalachian foothills. Inside the Walker cabin, all three brothers were preparing for the night as if it were a storm they'd always known would come. Levi sat at the kitchen table cleaning a rifle older than he was, an heirloom from their grandfather who had carried it through the coal strikes of the 1930s. Jesse checked ammunition with a practiced calm that bordered on ritual. Owen moved through the house, reinforcing doors, closing blinds, and making sure the generator had enough fuel to last until morning. The Walker Code was many things, but one truth stood above all. They would rather die on their land than run from it. Owen finally broke the silence. Sheriff Pike came down the main road. He didn't stop, but he slowed when he passed. Levi didn't look up. "He's warning us without saying it." Jesse slid a shell into his pocket. "He knows Earl's coming. He also knows Earl won't wait until morning," Owen added. The three brothers exchanged a look. It wasn't fear. It wasn't even anger. It was recognition, the understanding shared by men who realized that the line had been crossed so completely there was no return. From outside, the first distant howl of a hound echoed through the hills. The brothers froze. Jesse moved to the window. "Dogs," Owen joined him. "Earl's hunting us, mountain style." Levi stood. "No, Earl's not hunting." He locked the bolt on the rifle. "He's surrounding." 4 miles away, the McCready men gathered in a clearing off Cherokee County Road 62. The last streaks of daylight stretched thin across the treetops, painting the sky in bruised purples and reds. Earl McCready stood in the center of the clearing, shotgun in hand, giving orders like a general preparing for a siege. 11 men ringed him, men with rifles, revolvers, lanterns, dogs, and decades of Appalachian resentment simmering just below the skin. Earl didn't shout. He didn't need to. His voice carried the weight of 12 coffins. "We don't rush the front," he said, eyes sweeping the ground. "Walkers expect that," the men nodded. "We push through the ridge behind them. Come in from the east, where the hill curves down. They ain't got coverage there." A man with a scar across his cheek stepped forward. "And if they're waiting, then we put 'em in the ground next to my boys." No one spoke after that. The hounds were released at dusk. Within minutes, they picked up the trail. Within an hour, the McCreadys were moving through the woods, silent, armed, determined. Tonight would not end quietly. Back at the cabin, the dog's howls drifted closer, bouncing off the hills like echoes from another world. Owen checked the back door again. They're circling from the ridge. They're not taking the road. They wouldn't, Levi said. Jesse wiped sweat from his forehead. The air felt too still, too tight, like the world itself was holding its breath. Levi moved to the fireplace and lifted a loose plank from the floor. Beneath it was a leather satchel wrapped in oilcloth. He pulled it out and set it on the table. Inside were three things: a map of the ridge, a metal whistle, and a switchblade with dried rust on the edge. Owen stared at the items. "We haven't used that whistle in a long time." Jesse looked between his brothers. "We're doing this like before?" Levi nodded. "Like before." The whistle wasn't a signal for retreat. It wasn't a warning. The whistle meant something far more brutal. Split up, ambush, survive. Owen inhaled slowly. Jesse exhaled sharply. Levi pocketed the whistle. The sound of snapping branches echoed from the tree line. Closer, heavier, deliberate. Jesse moved to the lamp by the window and turned the flame low. "They're on the ridge, 50 yards out." Owen tightened his grip on his shotgun. "How many?" "Too many to count silhouettes." Levi didn't blink. "Good. Means they're close enough for this to matter." And then the first shot cracked through the night. A bullet shattered the top corner of the window, spraying splinters across the room. Jesse dropped instantly, rolling behind the sofa. Owen stepped to the side, lifting his shotgun. Levi didn't move. His eyes narrowed, adjusting to the angles of sound and distance. Another shot, then another. The McCready men were firing not to kill, but to rattle them. Levi raised his rifle and aimed through the broken glass. "Jesse, lamp!" Jesse kicked the lamp over, plunging the room into near darkness. Shadows swallowed the walls. Outside, the muzzle flashes became easier to track, brief, sharp bursts against the tree line. Levi fired once. A scream echoed, then silence. Jesse grinned from the floor. "That'll slow him." "No," Owen corrected. "That'll make Earl mad." Another series of shots erupted. Closer, more frantic. The dogs barked wildly, pulling toward the cabin. Leaves rustled, boots thudded against dirt. Jesse leaned toward Levi. "Now!" Levi shook his head. "Not yet." The McCready men advanced, shouting orders, firing into the windows, tightening the noose around the Walker cabin. Glass shattered. Wood splintered. Dust filled the air. Owen braced the back door with his shoulder. "They're pushing from both sides!" Levi raised the whistle. Jesse's eyes widened. "Already?" Levi nodded once. He blew it. A single sharp note cut the night, and the walkers moved. Jesse dove out the side window. Owen burst through the back door into the trees. Levi slipped out the front, hugging the shadows of the porch as bullets tore through the planks behind him. The walkers were no longer trapped. They were loose in the mountains, and that changed everything, because Center, Alabama had just taken its first shots, and the night was far from over. The whistle's echo hadn't even finished bouncing off the ridge before the walkers vanished into the dark. To anyone watching from afar, it might have looked like magic. 3 silhouettes dissolving into the Appalachian night without leaving so much as a shadow behind. But to anyone raised in Center, Alabama, it was something older than magic. It was mountain instinct. The walkers knew every tree, every ditch, every hollow on that land. They'd hunted deer along those slopes since they were boys. They'd buried dogs, secrets, and more than one memory beneath the pine needles. This was their territory in a way no map could ever illustrate. But tonight, the land wasn't quiet. Tonight, it pulsed with the footsteps of armed men. Earl McCready's men exploded out of the tree line behind the cabin, weapons ready, dogs pulling at their leashes. The shattered cabin windows glowed faintly with lantern light as the McCreadys stormed forward, shouting, sweeping rooms, shooting into shadows. They were too late. The walkers weren't hiding. They were hunting. Levi Walker crouched behind a fallen pine log 15 yards from the cabin, rifle braced, breath steady. Through the scope, lantern beams flickered as McCready men searched the cabin. He counted heads, 6 inside, 3 circling the porch, 2 holding the dogs, Earl somewhere behind them. He steadied his breathing. 1, a McCready leaned into the doorway. 2, a second man stepped onto the porch, gun raised. 3, Levi fired. The first bullet punched through the railing and into the man's thigh. The second went straight through the throat of the one holding the lantern. The clearing erupted in shouts, gunfire returning instantly, spraying bark from Levi's cover. He slid backward into the shadows before they could triangulate. He wasn't trying to kill them all. He was trying to scatter them. Jesse Walker sprinted through the underbrush, blood pounding in his ears, breath razor sharp. He moved with the kind of agility that only desperation can sharpen. Behind him, 2 McCready men barreled through the brush, shouting, firing blindly. Jesse dove behind a boulder and waited. One of the McCreadys stepped into view, rifle raised. Jesse snapped forward, grabbed the barrel and yanked it downward. The gun discharged into the dirt. Jesse drove his knee into the man's stomach, sending him collapsing. The second man lunged. Jesse pivoted, caught him by the collar, and slammed him into the boulder with a crunch that silenced the woods for a moment. The man slid down the rock, limp. Jesse grabbed the fallen rifle. The first McCready groaned, crawling. Jesse didn't hesitate. One blow to the skull. Silence. He threw the weapon over his shoulder and took off again. The dogs were barking. More men were coming. He didn't want to be here when they arrived. Owen Walker moved slower, more methodical, weaving through the trees along the eastern slope. His shotgun hung in one hand, ready. Owen had always been the backbone of the family, steady, patient, deliberate. He wasn't the fastest or the meanest, but he was the most dangerous. He heard the dogs before he saw them. 3 hounds crashing through the bushes, handlers shouting behind them. Owen crouched low, snapped a broken branch, and tossed it to his right. The dogs veered toward the noise. He waited. The handlers stepped into view. 2 young men, cousins of Chet, both wide-eyed and trigger-happy. Owen stepped from behind a tree and fired once. The shotgun blast lit the trees like lightning. One handler fell instantly, the second dove behind a stump firing wildly. Bark exploded around Owen's head. He dropped to one knee, aimed carefully, and fired again. Silence. The dogs scattered, confused without direction. Owen exhaled slowly, reloaded, and began moving again. He didn't know where Levi or Jesse were, but he trusted them. The walkers worked best apart, moving like 3 shadows sharing one mind. But tonight, the McCreadys were multiplying, and the shadows were thinning. Back at the clearing, Earl McCready stood beneath the old oak, lantern in hand, rage etched deep in the lines of his face. Sweat and dust clung to him. His one good eye scanned the trees, hunting for movement. A wounded man stumbled toward him. "Earl, they're everywhere." "They're split up." Earl struck him with the butt of his shotgun. "I know what they're doing. The walkers always split. It's how they survived that fire back in '69. The man wiped blood from his mouth. "What do we do?" Earl stepped forward, voice cold and certain. "We burn the ridge." The men stared at him. "You heard me. If they love this land so much, fine. Let it turn to ash around them." He pointed toward the cabin. "Start with their home." Levi saw the first flicker of fire before the smoke rose. He froze, staring downhill as orange light crawled up the porch of the Walker cabin. The McCreadys had thrown lanterns inside. Flames caught the curtains, the dry floorboards, the old pine beams. In seconds, the house they'd grown up in became a torch. Levi's breath caught, not from fear, but from memory. The last time fire consumed their lives, they were children. Their father had barely pulled them out. Now the McCreadys wanted to finish what time hadn't. Levi turned sharply, raising the whistle again. One long note. Hidden in the woods, Jesse stopped running. Far on the ridge, Owen turned toward the sound. All 3 brothers emerged from different angles, converging, hearts pounding, anger replacing instinct. The cabin collapsed inward with a roar of flames. Jesse arrived first. "They burned it, Levi. They burned it to the ground." Owen stepped beside them, smoke drifting around his silhouette. He looked at Levi, waiting. Levi stared into the fire. Then he spoke, calm, deadly, precise. "They want us gone." He lifted his rifle. "So nobody leaves tonight." The war didn't start with the hanged men. It started now, and the mountains watched, knowing dawn would reveal more bodies than Center Alabama had graves for.